Okay, I am going to go ahead and get started. Hello everyone. Welcome to our Safer Internet Day webinar, Spotting Red Flags, Recognizing Online Abuse and Harassment. My name is Alanna Powers, and I'm the Research and Program Specialist at the Family Online Safety Institute. So, the Family Online Safety Institute, or FOSI for short, is a nonpartisan 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization that works to make the online world safer for children and their families. We work in what we call the three Ps of online safety: enlightened public policy, robust industry best practices, and good digital parenting. As we began to plan our Safer Internet Day programming, I found myself reflecting on what stood out to me as one of the most important facets of online safety in the past year. I thought about the growing reports of sextortion cases and AI notification apps causing harm to young people and their families, sometimes gravely. With this in mind, we chose to partner with our friends at Thorn and focus this Safer Internet Day webinar on discussing these issues as well as subjects related to online harassment, abuse, and CSAM. The first half of this webinar is a fireside chat between my colleague, State Policy Lead Marissa Edmund, and Thorn's Head of Research, Melissa Stroebel. During this conversation, they will define the online harms we will talk about today and give the audience advice about how to combat them. Marissa and Melissa will talk for about 25 to 30 minutes, and then there will be 5 minutes of audience Q&A. We encourage you to participate and put all questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. For the second half of this webinar, we will switch gears, and Adele Taylor, Youth Digital Programs and Partnerships Senior Manager at Thorn and No Filter, will moderate a panel discussion with two young people who are part of Thorn's No Filter Digital Safety Ambassador Program, Joyce Jin and Sabrina Samidon. This discussion will focus on how young people experience the online world, including how they take care of themselves and their advice when it comes to staying safe online. Please note that this discussion has been pre-recorded, and therefore we will not be taking questions for the second part of the webinar. Before we kick off this conversation, for those of you in the audience, please be aware that sensitive topics related to harassment and assault, including crimes against minors, will be discussed during this webinar. If you are not in the space to hear these themes, feel free to sign up, and I'm sending love your way. Now, I'd like to pass things off to my colleague, Marissa Edmund, to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Alanna, for setting the stage for our conversation today and speaking to the sensitive nature but importance of these issues. I'm Marissa Edmund, the State Policy Lead at FOSI, and I have previous work experience at the National Network to End Domestic Violence, NNEDV. And they have a tremendous program called Safety Net that tackles the intersection of domestic violence and technology. And I encourage all of you to look at some of their resources at nnedv.org. And I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk about these issues with the brilliant Melissa Stroebel of Thorn. So before we dive into these topics, Melissa, I would love for you to introduce yourself and share a little bit more about Thorn and Thorn's mission.
Thanks, Marissa, and to my partners over at FOSI, so happy to be joining you all and our audience today to talk about this as we celebrate Safer Internet Day this week. My name is Melissa Stroebel. I lead the research and insights discipline at Thorn. Thorn is a nonprofit that builds technology to defend children from sexual abuse in the digital age. Just as we know that technology has really evolved the landscape for sexual exploitation and abuse for minors, we also know that it's a fundamental part of the solution to combating this growing issue that we have online. We focus on building tools themselves to equip tech platforms, to detect CSAM, to equip law enforcement, to identify victims faster, and to empower caregivers, youth, their communities with awareness of the risks, red flags that they might see, as well as empowering them with resources for how to respond if they encounter them. One of the things we do at Thorn is research. We try and ensure that all of our programs and products, as well as the ecosystem at large, is grounded in an understanding of how children themselves are thinking about these issues, experiencing these issues, as well as the wider ecosystem of stakeholders who fight to combat these issues. I myself have been working in this space now for about 20 years. Before starting to focus on research, I started as a victim identification analyst with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and began my time there seeing firsthand the impacts and the harms that some young people are encountering, whether it is through online abuse directly or through offline sexual exploitation that then moves online as well. Ultimately, it was really clear to me after time there the immense gaps that existed in the research backing to how we strategically combat this issue at scale. And luckily, I found a home at Thorn to help me build that discipline.
We could not have asked for a better group to partner with for this conversation. It's timely and important work, as I've mentioned. So diving right in, I want to set the stage a little bit for the audience, Melissa. For the caregivers that are watching, could you define some of the types of CSAM that young people might be experiencing and how this shows up and how it presents online for kids?
Yeah, great point. So let's start with CSAM, CSAM. That stands for Child Sexual Abuse Material. Another term we frequently use in this space is CSE, which is Child Sexual Exploitation. And we're talking about it through the lens of where technology is intersecting with it. So CSAM itself is referring to images and videos, audio at time, other forms of media that an offender, an abuser has used to memorialize the victimization of a minor. It is sexually explicit imagery and videos that records the abuse and at times is recirculated to offender communities for ongoing re-victimization of that child who experienced abuse. Exploitation can often occur, such as forms of sextortion, grooming, before it gets to the point of abuse imagery being created. And so it's important to remember that the risk spectrum is not only when abuse imagery has been created, it also occurs leading up to that point. Now, when we think about what might lead to CSAM being created, we look at really two primary pathways. And there's a lot of different experiences that can sit within those pathways. On the one hand, there are clearly exploitative pathways that lead to the creation of this imagery. One example would be hands-on offline sexual abuse that's occurring in communities, frequently by people who are considered in a circle of trust for that child, such as parents, neighbors, coaches, and other trusted members of the community who intentionally use that access to the child to abuse them. They then also memorialize it with pictures and videos and share them online for ongoing revictimization. Now, one of the things that the internet really fundamentally changed when we think about sexual exploitation of kids is that they are not necessarily safe just being in a protected home or bedroom because their cell phones are there with them. What that means is that historical geographic barrier that we as adults, as parents, really rely on. You know, it's 10 o'clock, it's curfew, my child is home in their room, safe and sound. There is a doorway to a much wider community that is available to them, which number one, we have to remember provides a lot of really valuable experiences, but it also introduced new elements of risk. And that's how sometimes online grooming happens, where bad actors intent on abusing or victimizing a child uses access to them to build trust, to coerce, and to exploit. Now, those are some examples of exploitative pathways that lead to CSAM. But we have to remember that in this day and age, normal adolescent exploration is also introducing risk as well. Take, for example, sexting. Now, before we all had cell phones in our pockets, and I say all because it's important to remember that the behavior of flirting via your cell phone is not unique to kids. Adults do it. There's an entire industry based on digital flirtation and romantic exploration. It's now impacting kids as well, though. That normal sexual development, flirtation, and similar behaviors, it's just collided with technology. And the reality is what might have started as lab partners who have been flirting all semester, 16-year-olds, just because they got home from their date at the movies doesn't mean that flirtation stops. And one of the ways that CSAM can result from that is in sharing nudes. Now, if those nudes spread beyond that consenting exchange, a whole new world of risk opens up for leaked nudes, extortion, such as sextortion, and other harms that can come.
Thank you, Melissa. I mean, I think that was incredibly important to sort of dissect or talk about how it goes from something that is normal child development behavior, consensual, into exploitation, and how it can be tricky, especially for young people when they're experiencing it, to decipher between the two. And I think that is why these conversations are so important. So you mentioned grooming, sexting. I want to bring in two additional terms that folks might have heard of, but may need a bit more clarity on understanding what it is, and if they have experienced it or if someone in their life has experienced it. And those two terms are sextortion and AI-generated CSAM. So I think we can start with sextortion. And can you define that for us? And then what would happen if someone is a victim of sextortion, in particular a young person?
Sure. So sextortion refers to cases where somebody uses an image of a minor, an explicit image of them, and threatens to leak that image if they don't do something. And the something is the thing that tends to be a little bit varied in sextortion. The larger umbrella of sextortion cases frequently and most often is related to relationship style or sexual interaction style threats, demands for more images, demands for returning to a relationship. But what we've also seen increasingly is financial threats. And this is probably a term, financial sextortion, the audience may have heard more of in the last couple of years because we have seen a marked increase in these behaviors. Financial sextortion itself is unique from historical sextortion trends, where historically sextortion has predominantly focused and targeted teens and females. This type of sextortion, overwhelmingly by about 90% of victims that we've seen in cases, targets teenage boys between the ages of 14 and 17. Also new is that it's being driven by organized criminal groups globally, as opposed to if you were, say, experiencing relationship-based extortion, in which case the demands are coming from somebody who you are in contact with offline. So that's sextortion. Let's talk now a little bit about AI-generated CSAM, another threat that we are hearing increasingly about. AI technology is unlocking a lot of amazing things. And this is the thing with technology. It offers a lot of value for society. And it also creates vectors of harm that we need to anticipate and we need to speak to and defend against. We are seeing cases where AI generative technologies are able to create very realistic abuse imagery of minors who may not have experienced that actual act offline in order to create that imagery. Now, in sextortion, we're seeing about 10% of cases where those offenders are threatening the victim with an image that was fake or somehow manipulated. We're also unfortunately seeing cases where it's not just offenders targeting child victims specifically for abuse. Unfortunately, it's becoming an abusive behavior among peers as well. And we're seeing that on the rise also.
Thank you for sharing that you can be a victim of sextortion, whether it's from someone that is in your social network offline or from someone that you met online. So just making that clear that it doesn't have to be, as you said, extortion that happens from one of these crime groups, but it can also it could start as that conversation that started over text message with someone you know, and then unfortunately turns exploitative when AI's generated CSAM is used, or just another sexually explicit image is used to threaten the person who's in that image. So we've talked a little bit about what exists out there, grooming, sextortion, AI-generated CSAM. This is all quite heavy and quite, it's a lot for, I think, caregivers and young people to be experiencing. So I want to switch gears just a little bit. Now that we've discussed the harms, I want to get into some of the solutions. So we know that young people are experiencing this. And as Alanna mentioned at FOSI, we operate in what's called the 3 Ps. So industry best practices, good digital parenting, and enlightened public policy. So I want to start with parenting and caregivers. So I imagine there are a ton of caregivers listening to this webinar. So what are some tools that parents can have? What should they be looking out for? What conversations should they be having with their kids or the young people in their lives to get ahead of some of these topics?
So one of the best things that we can do as parents is not to wait for something bad to happen to initiate these conversations with the young people in our lives. What we talk about at Thorn is early and often. And we don't have to think about digital safety conversations just through the lens of how do I help my child recognize sextortion? What do I tell them to do if someone leaks their news? There's a really long runway of behaviors and awareness that we can build before we get into what can feel like scarier, higher cost conversations to help normalize and create a really open door for the young people in our lives to talk to us. So an example would be when your child does start to go online, is sitting down with them. It is sitting there with them to see what is exciting for them. It's asking them, well, why do you like to play that game? And asking them, well, why do you talk that way with that person online? Or if they get a friend request, well, why would you want to connect with them? Not just don't connect with them. Why would you want to? And helping them build the skills to understand the nuance of digital friendships, just as we help them build the skills to understand the nuance and navigate offline relationships. When we think about it, I mean, we as parents would never take our kids to the playground for the first time and just drop them off and back away and not stay, not watch, not engage, not, play with them. We gradually move further away from the play and give them increasing independence because we've helped them build the skills to know how high on the ladder is safe at 4 versus at 6 versus at 10. And what do they do if a kid takes their toy away on the playground or pushes them down? We are there the first time and the second time, and then we gradually help them work through it on their own. So that is definitely the very first recommendation I have, and probably the one that I would leave everybody with is just start engaging with them, start that conversation, and then gradually introduce more topics as is age appropriate.
And I love that tool because I think it opens up the conversation, not just, as you said, when something scary or something harmful happens, that can be a little bit harder to have a conversation around. But having those conversations, as you said, early and often about what games do you enjoy using online, what games do you enjoy playing, rather, and what social media do you like to engage with can be helpful to start those conversations. And I think something also to help young people maybe either bring up this conversation or for parents to get ahead of it, what I hope comes through in this webinar is to release and reduce the stigma and shame that comes with someone who might have been a victim of sextortion or AI-generated CSAM, because we know these conversations and these experiences are uncomfortable, they are scary, but removing that stigma and knowing that there are trusted adults that can help is really important to know if you are experiencing this as a young person or as an adult who wants to have these conversations with the young folks in their lives.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point to underscore, Marissa. I think two things come to mind for me. Number one, these are experiences of sexual abuse. They are incredibly sensitive, private, scary experiences for victims as well as their families. And even if we weren't talking about a physical assault or an assault of any type, there's still components of sexuality and exploration and topics that parents we're not comfortable having the talk, guys. Let's just name it for what it is. The talk is uncomfortable for us. It is uncomfortable for our kids at any age. And if we think about it, how hard it is to just get those words out of your mouth to start the conversation with your teenager or with the young person in your life, can you imagine how much harder it is for your 14-year-old to ask the question of, like, what do I do if somebody asks me for a picture of my boobs? What do I do if somebody flirts with me online? It's going to be so much harder for them to start the conversation. And that's why it's really important for us to rip the band-aid off first and to say it's okay that it's an awkward conversation and to encourage it. I also want us to remember, particularly with financial sextortion right now, and it is not exclusively financial sextortion, to be clear, those who abuse children, particularly sexually abuse them, absolutely count on their silence. That is what they count on. And we should never reinforce that. Right now, there are warnings being utilized and weaponized in financial sextortion cases that say, if you tell, you will get arrested. If you tell, you will be expelled from school. If you tell, your parents are going to cut off all of your access to friends and you'll be grounded. Those are the warnings right now that are being used to help isolate and silence kids being targeted. And we need to make sure that kids understand, even though they need to be aware of risky outcomes and possible negative consequences, that despite all of that, we will be there right next to them, helping them walk through those consequences. That needs to be the most important thing they come away with.
Thank you so much, Melissa, because I think, as you said, that shame, it's not just embarrassment or embarrassing to have these conversations. It is a tool of the perpetrator to silence the victim. And I think so. These conversations are incredibly important. And as you said, I think ripping the Band-Aid is one of the most perfect analogies that that could be used. So we know that a lot of these instances are happening on social media. So the next P in FOSI's 3 Ps is industry best practices. So what is the role of tech platforms in addressing or preventing some of these harms from happening?
Well, at the end of the day, they are the ones building this from the ground up. And builders have always had a responsibility that we need to innovate. We as a society need to move forward and advance in all aspects. And as innovators, through all of history, every invention is considered against not only the positive outcomes for society, but the risks that it carries for society. That balance has to be there and has to be part of the development process. Child safety, regardless of the platform, needs to be considered from the beginning of the development, the policy development, the feature development, regardless of if it is an adult-only platform or not. The simple reality is that kids are everywhere on the internet, and bad actors go where kids are. So if we simply start with the premise that we will design for our most vulnerable and go from there, we are already setting ourselves up for safer online societies. In addition to that, we really have to make sure that technologists are engaging with the child safety ecosystem to make sure that they understand the issue, how it might show up, unintended impacts, unanticipated impacts, because they aren't child safety experts. They shouldn't be. They are building technology, they are engineers, there is a small group that focuses in different areas of human rights, and it is valuable for that diversification to be at the table as we consider the way to design the safest, most inclusive platforms that we can.
Thank you. And I think, FOSI loves collaboration. And I think you spoke to that just a moment ago about maybe it's not the tech platform that is the most experienced in understanding the needs of children, but there are groups like Thorn that do, and to have those collaborations and those conversations so that you're bringing in the right child development folks. We like to call this a whole of society approach to protecting children. And I think something that I'm a big advocate for also in terms of how on tech platforms, how to protect ourselves is user tools. I think being able to block unwanted contacts and report disturbing behavior is incredibly important. So ensuring that platforms have easy to navigate tools so that users can do that. Because as you mentioned, we can't just act like children aren't, ignore the problem, act like children aren't on social media. We have to prepare for that, the reality that they might be.
Yeah, I agree, Marissa. And I would add on to them being accessible, they have to be reliable. And we we know young people are disproportionately likely to look to online safety tools before they turn to somebody in their offline worlds. But the simple reality is a tech platform is not going to provide the same support that a caregiver, a teacher, a trusted adult would in the offline world. But it also, those reports can't go into a black hole. There has to be some sort of turnaround for the reporting user. If not, over time, trust in those systems will erode, and it's a really important safety pillar for users, young and old.
Absolutely, Melissa. Thank you for driving that home. The importance of not just the accessible but reliable user tools, and that it takes everyone. Because, as you mentioned, a young person might first look to an online platform, a user tool to block an unwanted contact, but it's still the offline social network that is going to be able to support them through what they're experiencing. The last P is enlightened public policy. And I think as the state policy lead at FOSI, in order to address some of these harms that we're seeing, I think I've seen quite a few really promising and common sense laws at the state level to help address some of these issues. And that includes updating existing CSAM laws to include AI-generated images. And I think this is important for victims who are seeking recourse, and they go looking for help, and they find that there's actually no law on the books that addresses this type of particular issue because the law has not updated with where we are with technology. So quite a few states already have laws that include AI-generated images into their existing CSAM laws. And we think that this is really important that other states that don't have this already, that they encourage them to continue to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would remind everyone that federally, AI generated CSAM is illegal. And what Marissa, you pointed out that states are working rapidly to make sure that that coverage exists and to respond to that emerging threat is so critical, and where policymakers stand to build policies that are really grounded in data and in the science and understanding how these threats are evolving, and the strongest mechanism to respond to them really is a critical role for policymakers.
Absolutely. And so we've talked about what parents and caregivers can do. We've talked about what tech platforms can do. And we've also talked about how policymakers can help fill in these gaps. And I know we've talked about a lot of very scary and heavy topics, but right before we jump into audience Q&A, Melissa, I wanted to ask you, just on a lighter note to end on a positive, what are you hopeful about in this space? And since you've started working in this field, what has improved?
You know, the thing that I think about most often that gives me hope in this space is the increasing awareness around it. When I started working on this issue, there was about 10 of us on the team that I worked on, reviewing thousands of cases. And now we have a much broader ecosystem engaged and actively combating this issue. And really importantly, we have got much more public awareness starting to have those conversations, whether it is within their community or with the young people in their lives. So if people are thinking about what can I do coming off of this call, I would say just have one conversation, whether that is with someone in your parenting group, whether that is with your child, with a niece or nephew, with a family member, just one conversation helps to create more awareness. And that is one of the most important things that we can do to stem the tide of this threat.
Thank you. And you, leading into another question, I think it was a great segue. You talked about awareness. And we know even the example that you used in the beginning of the webinar about two young people who might be flirting from their science class. We know that schools, a lot of these instances sometimes happen in schools. What is the role of schools and educators in preventing these online harms, or is there just like more awareness that can happen at this level, as we know that this is a huge way to reach young people?
You know, I would say schools at their base are a place for caring adults to help kids safe. So first and foremost, making sure that as educators, whether they are administrative, classroom, anything, keeping at the base, making sure that your students feel safe and comfortable coming to you if something happens, you are there as a first line of defense. The next thing I would offer is really staying on top of these emerging threats, because oftentimes you will be, as a school, on the front lines to recognize it. AI generated CSAM, deep fake news among minors is one of the most clear examples of that right now, where schools are feeling on the back of their feet in terms of understanding how to respond, and even starting a conversation that names it as prohibited behavior, as harmful behavior, because there's too much right now where we are feeling torn on, do we just laugh it off as kids being kids? And I think having a policy in place that names it as harmful, names it as prohibited, and has a system in place to respond if there is word it is happening in the school is a really important step that can be taken.
Thank you for that, because I think what I hear a lot in these conversations is folks are saying, how is this not already on the books as, prohibited behavior? So I think exactly naming it is incredibly important. And I'll take the next question that came over that I think speaks a little bit to that naming of these harms is, what policies would you like to see beyond updating CSAM laws to protect children? And I think as we've seen, at least at the federal level, there has been a decent law called the Take It Down Act, and I believe Alanna has put it in the chat, that seeks to address when someone has been a victim of non-consensual intimate image sharing. Whose responsibility is it to take that down? And is there even a law on the books that allows someone to pursue that action to say, you must take this down? And I think, of course, there are, a plethora of considerations with that law, but I think this is a good first step. And again, as you said, Melissa, naming it, that the person who uploaded this, that is a crime and that is unlawful, and making sure that there is recourse for survivors. I'll take one more question before we jump to the youth panel. How do we reach young people who are engaging in risky behaviors, such as creating generative AI CSAM of their peers? What should effective education look like to address this, both in schools and out of schools? So I think this speaks to some of that peer-to-peer harm that can happen.
Yeah, so I think, as we said, first and foremost, it is naming generative AI, deep fake news specifically, as a harmful behavior. It is not just a picture. Um, it seems like a really low bar of entry, but I continue to see reporting, online conversation where there is a very active debate on if there is any harm in creating these pictures. We need to start with a baseline of yes, because kids are following our lead on this one. The other thing is to really start folding all forms of digital sexual exploitation risk into conversations around relationships, consent, safe sex, those conversations that we are already having. Technology is a component of that, and we should start speaking about how that will show up and what consent looks like on these topics, what safe sexual exploration looks like as it comes to the internet. Kids are wired to take risks. It is for all of our benefits as humans that at that point in our development, we are taking risks. What is important is that they understand the nature of the risk, the possible outcomes of the risk. In other words, is this the third rung on the ladder or the 20th rung on the ladder? And then ultimately knowing where to turn if they do have a risky interaction and it goes wrong.
Thank you so much, Melissa. If I had two takeaways from this conversation, I think it is conversation and collaboration, bringing up these conversations, having them early and often with the young people in your lives, and more collaboration among tech industry members and groups that are looking and invested in child development and child safety. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. And with that, I am incredibly excited to pass it along to Adele Taylor, who interviewed two young people who openly and bravely shared their experiences online. Thank you, Melissa, so much. And I will now pass it to Adele Taylor.
Name is Adele Taylor. I'm the Senior Manager of Youth Programs and Partnerships here at Thorn, where I get a chance to lead our youth-focused initiative called No Filter. No Filter's mission is to empower young people to navigate the online world by fostering education, engagement, and a supportive community that prioritizes digital safety. But today, I'm extremely thrilled because I am joined by two of our outstanding youth council members who, for the last 6 months, have been with us as young leaders, creating impactful digital content, advising tech platforms on youth-focused initiatives, and brainstorming innovative solutions to promote online safety. So I'm incredibly excited to hear them talk today all about the important Safer Internet Day conversation we are having. And with that said, I think we can go ahead and get started. Sabrina, Joyce, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I am going to kick it over to the both of you. If you can just introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I'll start. Hi, my name is Sabrina, and I am a 13-year-old student from California. I'm immensely passionate about digital safety and really excited to share my perspective in today's panel.
I'm Joyce. I'm 17 from Texas, and I'm also really, really excited about today. I am a content creator for No Filter, and I can't wait to talk about all of these things.
So excited to have you both here, and I love that we have you both on two different age sides. So I'm very curious to get your thoughts on a couple of these questions. I want to start off by just asking what interests you in joining the No Filter Youth Innovation Council at Thorn? And Joyce, I'll start with you, and then Sabrina, we can kick it over to you.
I actually went through some like traumatic experiences when I was an oblivious child on the internet. And ever since then, I've always wanted to use my experiences to help others avoid what I went through. I've tried on my own to like spread warnings and advice about being online to my family and friends, but it's not really that easy to spread the message outside of my circle. And I wasn't, the most popular kid. But I'm also really into art and design. I've always wanted to use that to help spread positivity. So I joined No Filter Youth Council as a content creator. And being in it has really allowed me to put my voice out there on a platform much bigger than if it was just me alone. And I'm really happy to be able to talk about my passions and actually feel like I'm making a change in the world.
Sabrina?
Yeah, so I first installed a social media platform when I was in fourth grade during quarantine. So being introduced to social media at a young age, I was unaware of the many dangers that lurked around the internet. But luckily, I was fortunate enough to not have any bad experiences online. However, being a consumer of numerous digital platforms for many years allowed me to recognize the challenges that many youth face today in navigating the internet, especially in dealing with risky encounters. With this, after seeing an advertisement from No Filter to apply for their Youth Innovation Council and learning about their mission, I was inspired to make a difference and use my perspective to improve the experiences of fellow youth navigating the digital world.
You both have warmed my heart so much, and seeing you all develop content, getting your voices out there, meeting with tech platforms, it has truly just been so heartwarming to know that the next generation is so passionate about digital safety. And Joyce, I'm going to start with you with this next question because I know you talked about unfortunately having a bad experience online. So I would love to know, how would you describe your online world, both the positives and the negatives about it?
I think the internet is definitely more of a trade-off where you get positives for negatives. It's like a high risk, high reward situation. There's definitely a lot of good things. The good things for me are like you're able to meet people from all across the world. I have friends from like China and Africa and all of that. And you can really make friends outside of just your neighborhood or your school. And also as an artist, and this goes for like any creatives out there, it's really the only form I have to get my art out there for people to see. And also you're able to learn from a bunch of like educational videos online. Like I know I use YouTube for learning my AP physics class, and I could text all of my friends when I don't understand things. That's all part of the online world. And you have so much accessibility. But the negatives are also really risky because like not everyone online is kind or have good intentions. There's creeps and cyberbullies and trolls and scammers. They're all spreading negativity and false news. You can't just trust everyone, and that goes for the real world too, but it's a bit worse online because of the previously mentioned accessibility.
I definitely couldn't agree more. I know I love scrolling and finding new friends and people online, and also even finding new hobbies to enjoy. But it's also kind of what you talked about, that trade-off of, okay, well, how do I still keep myself safe while I'm navigating these new online relationships? Sabrina, I know one of the things that keeps coming up in this conversation is the role tech platforms specifically have in this. So I would love to know from you, how do you feel about youth collaborating with these platforms on improving digital safety?
Yeah, I believe that youth collaborating with platforms on improving digital safety is an amazing idea. Since youth are the ones who really consume the most digital content, especially on social media sites, they are equipped with an abundance of firsthand knowledge and ideas to share that can make a positive impact on digital safety. Me personally, as a digital safety ambassador on the No Filter Youth Innovation Council, I've shared my unique perspective and experiences on digital safety, which has allowed me to make a difference in the world of privacy and safety for technology. So this experience has really shaped me into being much more aware of what's around me, especially on the internet, and to also think critically about everything I'm consuming. So yes, I do believe that the youth collaborating with online platforms to improve digital safety will be a tremendous idea, since it will benefit the platform with having input from firsthand consumers and make the youth more inclined to participate in future endeavors to make a positive impact on digital safety.
Definitely. And I know you both have had an opportunity in this regard to meet with a couple of different tech platforms while you've been a youth council member, and seeing firsthand you all get a chance to collaborate with one another, come up, brainstorm with new ideas on how to make that platform safer. I know it's super valuable and also something that is probably rewarding to the both of you. So separate from tech platforms, I know another area, a group of people too, that really want to know what to do or how to get involved is parents and caregivers. So Joyce specifically, I know Sabrina just talked about improving digital safety. Joyce, I'm curious to know from you, how would you advise parents and caregivers to help guide their kids, guide their children when it comes to safely navigating this online world that they're in, especially when it comes to the risky encounters that they could experience, as you mentioned earlier?
I think first and foremost, it is so important for parents to have a safe and open environment with your kids already, so that they feel free to share with you. You have to be kind to them, be patient, encourage your kids to chat with you and be supportive of anything they do. And it's not just like online, it's like in the real world, at school, at home. You have to build trust. You don't want to be the surveillant, strict parent that's like checking your kids' phones, but you want to be the kind one who starts conversations. You don't punish them for things outside of their control, because strict parents raise sneaky kids, and that's from experience. You have to tell them the risks of the internet, not in like a fear-mongering way. You have to like educate them, like, you know, there's scammers, there's creeps out there. You have to be careful. You have to tell them that there's like red flags. You have to teach them how to watch out for them, and you have to teach them how to set boundaries early on, because that is so important. You have to like show them how privacy settings work, because I know personally I have all of my accounts on private, so no one can actually text me that well. And in the last case scenario, you always have the option to set their screen time or have parental controls. I know that's a thing on Apple phones, but be aware that it could be stepping into the like strict parent kind of line. And in like a risky scenario, if your kid tells you, let them know that they're not at fault. It is usually never the kid's fault. And also don't freak out. I know your first reaction is going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to my kid, but you have to be ready to support them as much as possible.
I love all of those tips. I think it's really important to have that trust, to have that open dialogue and conversation. And most importantly, what you just highlighted about having that continued dialogue, right? Not just having it one time where we say, hey, don't do this, but hey, do you know what privacy settings are? Or have you checked the accounts that you're following? Really having that continuous dialogue throughout their journey, I think is really important. And I know one thing you also highlighted is boundary setting. So we talk a little bit about the offline versus online boundaries and how to kind of, you know, make sure that they're one and the same too, that things that you're doing offline, you're doing online as well. And for us at No Filter, we try to have a couple of quizzes surrounding boundaries and what it means to be online. And one of them is specifically, what's your online self-care routine? So I would love to know, Joyce, I'm going to start with you. What is your online self-care routine? What does it look like to you to keep your digital well-being at top of mind when you're online?
I actually took the quiz a while ago. It told me to listen to my needs, stay offline when I need to after seeing something stressful, and make sure to block anyone who's making me uncomfortable. And those have definitely made their way into my online self-care routine. Nowadays, I make sure all of my accounts are private, as I mentioned before, so that no one outside of my trusted friends can like text and interact with me. And all of my public socials, so like my art account and stuff like that, have no information on them that reveals who I am or where I am or how old I am. I'm also not afraid to use the block and report button. It's my best friend anymore, because if I see someone who's making me uncomfortable or a post that makes me uncomfortable, I can block them and I'll never see them again. I also try to take days where I detox from social media altogether. So I'm not constantly in a world of like upsetting news and stuck in the doom scrolling cycle.
Those are all great self-care routines. I'm so happy you took the quiz and that it's working. I also love that you said block and report, because oftentimes we hear, oh, I'll just block them and that'll do it. But reporting them, we know, is also so important to do, especially so tech platforms can keep track and actually make actions off of that. Sabrina, I know we were just talking about self-care routines, and then we also talked a little bit about parents. Do you think parents should have online self-care routines as well? And if so, what should they be focused on?
Absolutely. I believe that parents should have online self-care routines because being a parent is definitely very demanding. So I think they should focus on the digital tools that help them prioritize their well-being. So this could include maintaining good mental health with apps or websites like Calm or Headspace, connecting with others through online spaces or support groups, and much more. That will really prioritize their well-being and balance their mental health and the struggles of being a parent with also having fun on the internet while being safe online.
I think that's great. And oftentimes we hear from peers, oh, this is what I'm doing to protect my self-care routine, or this is my self-care routine to protect my digital well-being. But we don't think about from the parent standpoint, how when they're online too, it can be very overwhelming, right? To see everything that your kid or your child or your children have access to and what that can do. And so I think it's definitely important, like you said, for them to also have a self-care routine. And Joyce, to your point earlier, continuing that dialogue and that open conversation. Speaking of setting boundaries, I know Thorn does, and also No Filter. We talk a lot about the importance of setting those boundaries. I know you all have shared with each other in the Youth Innovation Council what it means to set boundaries for yourself while you're online. Some of you have shared some amazing tips, which I think we've taken to heart too, and I now want to incorporate it. But Sabrina, when it comes to your own peers, how would you advise your peers to set boundaries online, especially when it comes to boundary setting with a stranger who could potentially wind up being dangerous?
Yeah, so I would advise my peers to set boundaries online by telling them to be direct and straightforward. While communicating online allows for dangerous people to hide behind screens, it also allows for us to put on a mask of bravery, even if we aren't completely comfortable with the situation. So with this, I'd instruct my friend to be clear about what they think is appropriate and inappropriate for discussions they have between them and a stranger. But this begins with recognizing the signs of tricky situations. If the stranger is asking them to send photos of themselves or personal questions like where they live and spamming their messages or anything else that makes my friend feel uncomfortable, I'd advise them to communicate immediately. Then, if the stranger does not respect these boundaries, I tell my friend to block and report them immediately before the situation gets even worse. So I remember one time my friend was getting a bunch of DMs from the same person who was kind of an old distant friend, and he was asking for money repeatedly. To help her out with this, I advised her to communicate that this made her uncomfortable and to set boundaries on what was okay and not okay to ask of her. When the person continued this behavior despite the boundaries that had been set, I told my friend to block him and report his account. This simple approach helps with navigating tricky situations, and I hope others will approach similar situations with this in mind.
Again, I love hearing that one of the key things you told your friend not only is to set their own boundaries and make their voice heard and instill that confidence, but that block and report as well, of making sure that she's taking action and feeling confident to do so. I think is really important. So I love that. And I'm hoping that any youth who might be watching this too really understands the importance of setting boundaries online, not just for yourself, but for your peers as well, and advocating on their behalf sometimes and what that can mean. So Joyce, I know Melissa just talked about some different types of exploitation that can occur online. I know we've covered quite a lot of them, unfortunately, these last 6 months as well. And we've had conversations about it. We've talked about it. One of them being online grooming, which we know is such an unfortunate situation that a lot of youth sometimes find themselves in. what are your tips specifically to stay safe from online grooming? And maybe if you want to expand a little bit of what are some tips you would even tell your friends on how to stay safe from online grooming?
I'm someone who has actually lived through online grooming and I've gotten out of it. And I think it is so important for you that you take the steps to prevent it more than anything. That's like the key to staying safe. Because once you get stuck in that situation, it feels, keyword feels, incredibly hard to get out of. But you have to trust your gut. If someone's asking for your private information, run. If someone way older than you tries to justify the age gap, run. If someone asks you for nude pictures, run. Never give out your personal information to people online, even those you trust, because groomers will always try to gain your trust and friendship first before revealing their true colors. So you have to always be wary and be ready to block when you run into any red flags. If you're feeling stuck on if something feels bad or not, trust your gut. And if you don't trust your gut, ask your friends and they'll tell you to trust your gut and leave. Um, I was groomed at 12 by someone who was 19, and I've always justified it in my mind that he was still in his teens, so it was totally okay. Because I've only seen like TV shows where the creeps are middle age or an old man. But remember that no matter what, you're still a child, and there's still an adult taking advantage of you. There is no age limit on who's a groomer. And remember that is always like never your fault. Don't be afraid to tell someone what you're going through. For kids, please tell a trusted adult about your situation, and I'm sure they will help you out. The way I got out was by mustering up the courage to tell my mom after a long time. You have to be brave and take that first step. I know how hard it is and how scary it is, but I promise a trusted adult can guide you and help you get out. And for parents, you have to make sure that you're creating that safe environment for your children. You have to be kind, not strict, encourage them to be honest with you and not punish them for it. I know your first instinct will be to be like shocked and disgusted, but don't direct that towards the scared kid telling you about their situation. You have to take the lead for them and call the cops if it's necessary. Tell them to block and report and take any necessary actions to helping your kid heal.
Wow. Joyce, thank you so much for being brave enough not only to talk to your parents, but for sharing that story with us today. I know that must have been extremely difficult. And it's your tips and your advice, though, is so important. I love what you said, not only for someone else who may be going through online grooming, but for the parents and the caregivers that are also watching this now, of really reinforcing that in that moment of your child or children coming to you, they are really scared for so many different reasons. They're scared of what can happen, what might be getting out, what might be even sent to their friends down the road. And having that courage and making sure that you're having a conversation where that your child can come and have a safe space and have a safe conversation with you is just so extremely important. So I appreciate you sharing your personal story with that. And I really hope that parents and caregivers watching that took all of the information and advice you just gave and can use it moving forward if necessary. So both of you have spent 6 months with us. We have a couple more months to go on the Youth Innovation Council. I think I can speak for the entire No Filter and Thorn team when I say we've loved having you. You all continue to push our own thoughts around digital safety and what youth might need and what youth might want to react to and see. I would love to know, Sabrina, I'll start with you, and then Joyce, I will end it with you. How are you hoping to influence a safer internet for your generation specifically? And I know you have really started already doing that bit by being part of the Youth Innovation Council, giving your insight, giving your own testimony sometimes, being a part of conversations. But I would love to know from you both, how else are you hoping to influence it for your generation? Sabrina, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so after learning about these issues during my time on the Youth Innovation Council, I'm hoping to influence a safer internet for my generation through innovation, action, and awareness. First, I want to pursue innovation to foster a safer internet. In addition to digital safety, I also have a passion for technology and programming. With this, I hope to one day create a platform where there are much more opportunities and much greater restrictions for like maintaining digital well-being, and like that's does a better job in filtering inappropriate content and restricting certain accounts. So this would be like a digital platform or a useful online tool. And furthermore, I would also want to take action by advocating for the implementation of specific privacy settings on digital platforms where it is needed, especially on platforms where many teens and adolescents are active on. And finally, I also want to spread awareness to my peers and other youth on how to stay safe online with the information that No Filter has equipped me with. I'll establish myself as a person that anyone can go to for digital safety advice and spread tips on social media and with posters I'd paste on my school's hallways. All in all, I want to influence a safer internet for my generation by using the skills No Filter has equipped me with to innovate for improvement, take action to advocate, and spread awareness to as many I can reach.
Well, I feel like you are almost all the way there, Sabrina. Thank you for that. Joyce, I'll kick it over to you.
I want to use my experience to help my generation and the next coming generations to come. And I want to use my platform to educate our generation on staying safe online. I think No Filter has taught me a lot more like content creation skills. I've gotten a lot more practice with mine. And I think being in No Filter is really amazing since we work with media platforms to make a real change. And I aim for all platforms to be safer for kids and teens alike. I think we can make a change to social media to have better filtering systems and really educate the younger generation and make sure that they know what they're getting into. Because let's be honest, nobody's paying attention to the 13 years or older limit. I hope to create a culture where young people feel safe in their online lives and that the internet can be a place of learning and connection rather than harm. Because it is so important in this digital age that we are keeping the internet a safe place and continue to promote positivity and education. And I hope that with my art and place in the organization, I can make a change in the online world.
Again, I think you are on your way, just like Sabrina. I loved having you both on the Youth Innovation Council. I know one question we like to ask just to wrap things up and keep it maybe on a positive note. If you could describe the internet in one word, what would it be? I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. And then whoever wants to start, curious to know your thoughts. I know it's kind of like a hard one. What do you?
I think I have a word in mind.
Okay.
So one word I'd use to describe the internet as is versatile, because like Joyce mentioned in a previous question, there are so many positive and negative sides to it, and so many ways that we're still learning and improving it, that it is definitely one of the most versatile things in this earth. But I hope one day we can make it as safe as possible and make the internet a place where we can all thrive with each other and reduce any dangers that are still lurking around today.
I love that word, versatile. I have to also agree, from different platforms to why you're on one thing to making friends to learning how to like bake a cake. It's just completely versatile, the good and the bad. Joyce, ending it with you. What's your word?
I would say accessible, because that was why the internet was built in the first place, to make everything accessible to you. And that's including like connections with other people, whether good or bad, connections to the internet, to YouTube, to social media. You have the accessibility to all of those things at your fingertips or on your big TV screen. You can basically do anything on the internet, and that's really a big part of it. And I think that's why accessible is a good word to describe it.
I love it. We've got versatility and accessibility as what our youth are describing as the internet. I think we could probably all agree that those two words are very high up on the list of the way we could describe the internet. Joyce, Sabrina, thank you both so much for being a part of today's conversation, for sharing your insights, for giving your advice to anyone that happens to be watching today. I also want to give a special shout out to the FOSI team for highlighting the importance of youth voices and making sure that they are being heard, especially on Safer Internet Day, where we're all trying to come together to really make the world or the internet a better place, not just today, but for the future as well. So I look forward to working with Sabrina and Joyce and the rest of our Youth Innovation Council members for the next couple of months, and working to stay safe, stay informed, and let's keep working together to build that better future. Thank you both.
So, on behalf of everyone here at FOSI, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you especially to Thorn and No Filter, Melissa, Adele, Joyce, and Sabrina for making this webinar super informative and worthwhile. For more information on Thorn's wonderful work in this space, please visit thorn.org. And a recording of this webinar will be posted on our YouTube in the near future. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but feel free to reach out to us at fosi@fosi.org with questions as well, if there's anything that you would like us to answer and talk through. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and happy belated Safer Internet Day.